From blatant pay-to-win to items requiring dozens of hours to obtain, Midnight Hordes is a game so poorly executed that I'm surprised no one has really talked about it until now. For context, Midnight Hordes is a multiplayer round-based survive the killer type game where you can choose to AFK in a corner for 3 minutes straight, or gang the boss for 3 others, if you even have the items for that in the first place. With that said, I think I'm gonna go straight to the point and point out the problems of this game. Chapter 1: Horrendous New Player Experience. Midnight Horrors has easily one of the worst new player experiences I've ever seen. You're thrown in the deep end of the pool and you're expected to float above the water, meanwhile horrors beyond your imagination try to drag you deeper and deeper until you inevitably drown. There is nothing you can do about it, death is your only way. Most killers outrun you base speed, and since you just started the game, you just die. You can deal with this by saving up enough points to buy a speed coil, and this is where another problem begins. Since you don't have a coil, you can't survive like 80% of the base killers that exist in the game, meaning you have to waste even more time trying to get points. Getting a coil requires almost 10 straight minutes of mindlessly running around. Since you can't even survive more than half the killers, you end up wasting so much more time than what was needed. The laughable part is, regardless of how long you last, mid-round you get a yield of 1 point. Instead of the game keeping players engaged with forgiving mechanics, the game would rather give you the bare minimum because, sorry, I see you tried your best to survive the round, but I'm too lazy to compensate you, so here's a random point I found lying around. Enjoy! No coil, no points, but the coils require points. I don't blame developers for what they do, except for a couple cases, but this really feels like they wanted to increase playtime to appear more on the Roblox algorithm. And the whole problem to begin with was how trash the beginner experience is. If you're a new player without any permanent items whatsoever, the gameplay loop just devolves into repeatedly dying until you get a speed coil, then you get fed up with the game, you leave. In a good scenario, you can encounter a monster, barely survive without any items, and finally get a coil. In Midnight Horrors, you can encounter a monster, die almost instantly because you literally cannot do anything, repeat it another 10 times, and pray to God you get a good server with people having thousands of survivals because you can hide behind their summons. Also, if you want to take a break and come back later, well, screw you. If you leave at any moment whatsoever and don't come back after 5 minutes, all your points get wiped. If you leave at any moment of the game and come back before the 5 minutes, your points get deducted by 10%. This effectively means that unless you don't care about your damn points, you are punished for changing servers, especially if they have a lower player count, where the killers usually have their focus elsewhere on other players. Do you see the problems now in starting out? Chapter 2: Horrible Killer Designs. Most of the killers in the game either outrun you or just instantly kill you, and you can't do anything about it. What's worse is that there are more than 400 killers that can be randomly chosen. And for a guy just starting the game, you wonder what the hell you're dealing with. There is no text stating how to counter them, most of the killers are not sight readable, and worst of all, you're not told literally anything about the killer. I will bring a hypothetical here. There is a killer named Terry. What do you think he does? Does he A. run around the map and chase anyone spotted? B. Spawn with multiple killers? C. Does some sort of quick time event? D. Cause an explosion that are shown with visual indicators? That's right, it's actually E. None of the above. This is the type of trash you have to deal with because none of them are explained. Visual telegraphing is a core principle of understanding most games, yet this game's killers don't visually say a lot. Every time a new killer spawns, that's a new threat you have to figure out because the majority of the time you don't even know what the hell they do. And this is where the main story begins. I said this numerous times, but the gameplay just devolves into hiding into some random ass corner or some running in circles because legitimately what else are you supposed to do? There is one killer I can name off of the top of my head and it actually explains the mechanics it has. It's Shade. Shade, in his phase 2, has an actual wall of text explaining what the mechanics do. It explains that you must not exceed the speed limit shown on the screen, and it makes the killer chase more engaging because you get to figure out what the mechanics do instead of being blindly tossed into the ring with the expectation of surviving. Better yet, it has text telling the player to slow down if they are past the speed limit. That doesn't mean Shade is the perfect boss because coils are never explained on how fast they go, and the fact that I didn't have to check the fucking wiki to learn all of this speaks volumes to how flawed this game is. And speaking of wiki, I feel like this is a good time to talk about how big of a problem it is. Chapter 2.5: A wiki day keeps the killers away. The fact that the game essentially requires a secondary monitor and a massive fandom wiki just to even learn the base mechanics of a killer is crazy. In well-designed game mechanics are taught through gameplay and visual indicators. While this is the case for Midnight Horrors, there are over 400 killers. In Midnight Horrors, information is withheld, forcing you to tab out and read walls of text after being defeated by mechanics you couldn't even have anticipated. If you face the killer once, it makes sense you'll die because you didn't react in time. Fair enough. The big problem, however, comes in your second encounter. Sure, you may have learned from your mistakes, and granted you are going to be doing better than last time, but due to the game's numerical overflow of killers, you're not remembering jack shit. If there's a short description saying this killer will mimic others, always be watchful, that would be a million times better than what we have right now, instead of just throwing a killer into the ring with the Halo Reach expectation of survival with no context. If you're a new player for this game, this should be your #1 expectation of problems that are gonna happen. I'd recommend having the game's wiki open so you can quickly check what the hell a killer does and you're just not left in the dark with little to no explanation as to why you died in less than a millisecond. Which makes this whole process a tedious mess of fact-checking, dying, and playing a roulette-style guessing game where you have to figure out what the hell something does, and speaking of the word tedious, Chapter 3: The Sisyphus Experience of Pay-to-Win and Mindless Grind. I'm gonna be honest, I was gonna add more chapters, but there are just so many problems with this stupid grind fest of a game that I just couldn't be bothered trying to point them out, so this chapter can technically be called Chapter 3: Everything Else. Anyways, ignoring exclusive and paid for items, which they make up like 75% of the items you can use in this game, your real progression starts with survivals. If you survive a killer round, you get a survival. Survivals are permanent and unlike points, they won't be reduced to atoms the moment you boot up the game. In the homeless man's hobo block market that sells everything but what you fucking need, you can get access to items that only require survivals. If you survive enough rounds, you can grab this item off the shelf at any moment whatsoever for basically no cost. This is what I meant by real progression. However, grinding through the progression is already miserable itself. Out of all of the items bought through survival, the only real interesting one is the metal bat. The others do indeed have use, but nothing compares to hitting some random ass dude with a lump of metal. You actually get to do something instead of being completely helpless. And yet it's almost locked behind 29.2 hours of straight gameplay. Here's the math I did with the assumption that the player does not die. Each round lasts 3 minutes, and there's a 30-second intermission. For a new player, all you likely have is a shitty coil and maybe some utility items that, if I'm going to be honest, don't do a whole lot. The first item you permanently obtain is a scissor that teleports you away from threats. It's useful and gets the job done, and that's where all my goodwill gets sapped. The next item is a huge jump requiring 300 survivals to use. It's a colorful toy car that is capable of ragdolling killers and other players. It's more useful as a griefing tool rather than directly helping you, and it's not very useful. The next item and last item I'll talk about because the latter two are just not worth talking about, and are way too grindy for their own good, is the metal bat. Basically, just whack a killer with it, you restore some health, and give the killer an aneurysm for a couple seconds. This only applies to the killer if they can be ragdolled, however. And the fact that you get this item so late into progression is already a complete joke itself. This means for your first 10 to 20 hours of gameplay, you are stuck with a magic scissor from God knows where, and a wacky toy car that gives anyone who touches it stage 5 brain rot. Combined with this, you do have access to the early game shop items that are underwhelming for an amazingly miserable experience for a game called Midnight Horrors. Also the pay to win. It's trash, not to even talk about how much it ruins the core gameplay. If you're one of the poor souls who bought this overpriced cash grab stuff, it's too late for you. The problem with Midnight Horrors is that it isn't a survive the killer game based on pure skill. Rather, it's a numbers game where the odds are so stacked against the player that it indirectly forces long-term grinding rather than using common sense and intellect. It feels like the gameplay is handled by a roulette system to mass the fact that the fundamental movement and interactable aspects of the game are horrifically broken. The game really feels like they hate anyone who hasn't dedicated their entire morning, evening for months on end, or paid like half their minimum wage paycheck, or simply punished for playing the game rather than offering an enjoyable experience for those who just wanted to try the game out. Which is why the game struggles so hard in the first place. The late game can be enjoyable. I am not doubting that, but you have to give up your soul to the Midnight Horrors developers, pay like 6 billion events, or simply pay with your wallet just to have an enjoyable experience. Would I recommend this game to others? No. Never. So, unless you're a wallet warrior or you're looking for a game you can grind for hours on, Midnight Horrors does not deserve your attention. Also, Defeated, if you're watching this, you're the developer of the Battlefront game that did a collab. I'm not saying you're the main man here, but please do not go through with this collaboration. This game is miserable and will anger the entire TBBF community if you go through with this plan. The Lord Jack badge requires so much RNG and invested time that almost no one except sweaty tryhards with thousands of survivals have it. Anyways, that's enough for me. I will occasionally play this game because late game is enjoyable. Ignoring that, yeah, that's about it for me. Enjoy the drawing I made for the thumbnail, and see ya.